Before we start coding some of those basics and getting into Python, I want to have one of those, I guess, sit down with the soccer team in the classroom or the locker room and talk about what just happened, right? Like, what did we actually do? What is Python for that matter, okay? And the simplest way that I can say it is that Python is a program or an application if you prefer, okay? Just like Firefox, Chrome, DuckDuckGo, Edge, right? Whatever browser you happen to use, when you open it, you're opening a program. Maybe Microsoft Office, maybe your favorite video game, right? You open up Steam. Those are programs that run on your computer. Python is exactly the same thing, okay? The difference is we're running this inside of the terminal, which is really scary, right? The black and white window, the black and white text, and it runs. When you open up Microsoft Office, you get a really nice looking user interface where you can move your mouse around and stuff, right? It feels a lot friendlier, but they're exactly the same thing. We will eventually get to the point where we can do some of that stuff, but right now it just looks different, but it's the same thing. What do I mean? Well, when we call Python, what do we hand it? We hand it something that looks like this, right? Print, and then we put in quotations. I'll just put the letter X so I don't have to write quite as much. Python sees that. We hand it some English. You might not be programming in English, but we hand it some English. Python says, oh, I know what I'm supposed to do with this, and then it does its thing. Okay, again, the program does. You have to hand it valid, and I'm going to put the word syntax here. Okay, syntax is a fancy way of saying you have to follow the rules. Okay? Just like in regular language, just like in English, if I say to you, chair, war, towel, dunk, hooray, run, the thing, right? That's gibberish. That doesn't mean anything. You as a person, you might say, hey, Rob, that didn't necessarily make sense. Python's not going to be nice. Python's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. That made no sense. Okay, so you're going to get errors unless you follow the syntax. If we hand Python valid syntax, it will turn that into something else. Okay? What will it turn into? Well, let's come over here real quick. What is a computer? Okay? So this is a computer, right? It's actually a box, of course, but what does a computer have? A computer has a CPU, right? A processor. It has RAM. It has memory and stuff. You have a hard disk. You have a motherboard, right? All of the stuff that goes into what your computer is. What manages all of this stuff? Okay, so I'm gonna put above here hardware, and I'm gonna put over here software. And the thing that is going to interact with that is your operating system. What are some possible operating systems? Well, you're probably either coding on a Mac or a Windows computer. Those are two operating systems. There's also Android, there's iOS, there's Linux, etc. Okay? The OS is interacting with the CPU, with all of this stuff, but it's also interacting with, I'm going to put down here, the UI/U. Okay? What do I mean? Well, the operating system is actually two different pieces. There is on the top the UI layer, which I put there, and there is the kernel. Okay, so this is the two pieces, right, to Windows, to Mac OS, etc. The UI is what you see, and you can move your mouse around and you can double click on something. It's when we type the word Python and we hand it something, right? That's us interacting with the UI. The UI talks back and forth to the kernel. The UI gets a command. Let's say you want to open up a file. The UI tells the kernel, hey, right, in whatever weird language, right, it's kernel programming, I need, looks like I forgot an N there, but I need you to do this, right? I need you to do this task, open up this file. The kernel is the thing that will talk to the CPU, the RAM, the hard drive, the motherboard, okay? It will send it back over to the UI, and then it will open up the file for you and display it in a meaningful way. All of this stuff over here, it is what you've heard about computers, right? Ones and zeros. That's what ultimately happens over here, but we don't want to write ones and zeros, right? There's also machine code, which is a tiny step up from ones and zeros. We don't want to write that either. I did that in college and I absolutely hated it. Okay, if that's you, more power to you. I appreciate you, but I have no interest in programming for the kernel, in doing ones and zeros, or doing machine code. What we are doing is this part up here with Python. We're going to be able to write it with some English. Python is going to be part of essentially, right, a piece of software down here that's going to talk to our OS. The operating system is going to shrink it down into this stuff, which is going to make the magic happen. Okay? We're not going to go into any more detail than that. This is just a super high bird's eye view of what's happening. When we write our code, it gets converted by the operating system because this is a program, right? The operating system uses the program to interact with all of this stuff over here. I'll put on there the GPU, right? So you've got your graphics card. When we do some graphics stuff, it'll interact with that, and that's how our program will work. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. You can rewatch this video a couple times, certainly ask questions, but this is the gist of what Python is, kind of how a computer and the software and the hardware interact. Let's go code.